Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Last week we spoke about the 10 fetters, which are a list or a set of defilements that particularly relate to the development of wisdom, awakening, and in general to the Vipassana path. So I thought this week I would talk about the other stream of development that we work on, the Samatha path, and the development of Samadhi with particular reference to the hindrances which obscure that, the 5 Nirvana. This is a list, as we'll see, that has some overlap with the 10 fetters. The 5 Nirvana are a set of unskillful mental states that have a particular effect of obstructing meditation by leading the mind astray. The word nirvana means like a wrong wandering. It has been said that it's better to think of them not as roadblocks or obstacles, but as byways or garden paths. You know, you're on the straight road and then you take a detour and you get lost. And you wander off and it can be difficult to get back to the main road again. To understand these, it probably be best to begin by saying a little bit about samadhi in general, clarifying what we mean by the development of samadhi. Samadhi is, among other things, it's the final path factors, the 8th factor of the Eightfold Noble Path, right? Samadhi, sama samadhi. And it is essential for awakening as well. One must have all 8 path factors developed to attain to the goal. It's the quality of mind that is defined in the text as non-wavering or stability, the stillness of mind. It's usually been translated, and I think mistranslated, as concentration. So if you're reading Buddhist books in English and you come across the word concentration, usually that's samadhi that the author's talking about. This is one of those translations that got stuck early on in the process of anglicizing Buddhism, and I think it leads people to the wrong image of what samadhi means, because it does not mean a narrow, concentrated mind. The mind is wide open, fully awake, spacious, bright, clear, spacious, the mind with samadhi. But it's still. It's stable. It's not wavering about. It's not jumping from object to object. So we develop this quality of samadhi with meditation that is classed as samatha, or tranquility or peacefulness meditation. And there are many different ways of doing samatha meditation, many different individual practices. And some work better for some people than others. Everybody is different. But the one the Buddha spoke about the most was mindfulness of breathing. And that's said to be good for everybody. It's like a general purpose meditation that any personality type can do mindfulness of breathing. The idea of any samatha meditation is that you are trying to remain mentally still. So that means you're not jumping from object to object. So that means that you have a designated object that is actually arbitrarily chosen at the beginning of the meditation. You sit down and say, I'm going to do mindfulness of breathing. So you make that decision, and the object is restricted to a single sense base. That we experience the world through 6 different sense bases: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. And one can use these different bases as a basis for meditation as long as one stays at a single base. There are meditations that use the visual sense. One visualizes like a colored disc. This is called kasina meditation. There's a meditation on sound that Ajahn Sumedho particularly likes to teach, is meditation on the internal sound, using the sound base. There's meditations using the mind base, like contemplation of the Buddha, or the metta, the karuna, the Brahma Viharas, the meditations on the divine abidings, loving kindness, and so on. That's using the mind sense. The mindfulness of breathing, we're using the physical body sense, the sense of touch. And it can be done on the nose tip, or some people find it easier to use the sensation of the movement of the abdomen as a focus point. But in any case, one is using the sense of touch. So this is another place where we have to be careful with the language we use to talk about it. You often hear the instruction to watch the breath. And I think most people, it's okay, they assume that actually means feel the breath, feel the sense of touch. But I have run into a few individuals over the years that they told me they're doing mindfulness of breathing, they're getting a headache. And the first couple of times I heard this, I couldn't figure it out, because it's the furthest thing I can imagine, getting a headache from mindfulness of breathing. I usually find it helps clear up a headache. It's so peaceful. But then I question the person, how they're practicing, and then it finally dawned on me what they're doing was they hear the instruction, watch the breath, and they take that literally, and without being fully aware of it, with their eyes closed, they're sort of crossing their eyes and trying to look at their nose tip. And that strain then causes them to get a headache. Once you tell them that, then they're conscious of that. They stop doing it, and the headache goes away. So it's actually feeling the breath. It's not watching it at all. So your mind is resting on the sensation of the breath, and anything else that arises to mind you disregard. And this is a skill that has to be developed. It's like riding a bicycle or anything else. It's a knack. It's a skill that you have to kind of find for yourself. The skill of non-attention, just allowing everything else to dissipate in the background. And then the mind becomes more and more filled with the sensation of breathing. And it's important you don't do that by trying to tighten down on the mind. It's best to think of it as letting the breath fill the mind. Keep the mind wide open and spacious, but try and fill it with this one single object. The breath is particularly good for that, because it does have this kind of movement that you can feel the breath sort of washing through this vast space of the mind and just washing everything away. And when it's established and you're doing it well, then it's very calming and peaceful and pleasant. It's a pleasant abiding. And it leads on into deeper and deeper samadhi, and the perfection of samadhi is jhana. And there are 4 levels of jhana. Now, before I get into the main theme of the Nivarana, the one other point that bears on that, which is very useful to keep in mind, is that you can think of the state of jhana as being actually the more natural state of mind, the simpler, more primordial state of mind. This is something that is also, I think, misapprehended by people, that they think of jhana as some exotic development, like something further, something to be gained, you know? Whereas something to be found, that's something to be discovered, you know? It's sort of like some new supernatural development. But it's actually the more natural primordial state of mind when it isn't obstructed by the hindrances. It naturally settles into jhana. In the mythological story of the origin of humankind in the Buddhist texts, this point is brought out in that the beings who are now human beings on this earth were originally Abhisara Brahma beings, which are beings that naturally abide in jhana. This is their natural state of consciousness. The second jhana consciousness is the Abhisara beings. They're self-luminous, they fly through the air, and they feed on bliss. And they became interested in the earth and became curious about the earth, and particularly nutritious foam that was forming on the oceans. And some of them tasted it, and then they become tangled up in material form and fell to the earth, and through several stages of devolution turned into the sorry specimens we know today. This is the mythological origin of humanity. So what this symbolizes is the primordial or original state of mind is jhana. And it only loses this stability, this unity, this calm and bliss when it becomes entangled with the senses. And they obscure the jhana. So when the entanglement is quieted down, the mind naturally settles into deeper and deeper samadhi and eventually jhana. It's simply the mind settling into a more natural state of being. The 5 hindrances are those things which prevent us from doing that. When we try and deliberately quiet the mind, stabilize the mind, the difficulty we have in doing that is we get caught in these 5 hindrances and go wandering and miss the point. Yeah? The first one of these is kama tanha, the desire for sense objects. Yeah? And this is really central to the whole endeavor of jhana, because jhana is also a development of the mind out of the plane of sense experience. It's like shedding a whole layer of samsara. It's not liberation, it's not completely shedding samsara, transcending samsara, but it is simplifying it. It's like taking a whole big chunk of it and just dispensing with it temporarily, so experiencing the mind in a more clear fashion. So we get caught up in sense desire, and that's to be understood in very broad sense. Any engagement in the senses is a hindrance to jhana. Now we take this one particular sense object, in this case we're talking about using the breath, and focus on that, and everything else is considered a distraction. So the mind can get caught up in sensual desire, but There's also more subtle forms of it that are particularly obstructive to the meditation, like the desire for bodily comfort. If one is sitting meditation and fretting about it's too cold or it's too hot or the seat is too hard or my knee hurts, you're caught in sensuality. You're caught in the sense sphere realm of existence. If you're able to disregard all of that and keep the mind still on the chosen object, then you're not getting caught in the sense sphere experience. This is why it's very useful when one is doing a retreat to take the 8 precepts. They're extremely beneficial because they provide a framework where you're closing off some avenues of sense diversion. If you're trying to develop the samadhi, you want to avoid seeking diversion and amusement through the senses. Now, even in ways that are quite harmless and ordinary, there's still a distraction from the unity of mind. And they're still keeping the mind trapped in that sphere of sense experience that is not jhana. It's an obscuration hiding the deeper state of peace within the mind that lies underneath and beyond the sense experience. So anything relating to going out through the senses, even in quite harmless and trivial ways, is a distraction from deepening samadhi. The second nivarana is vyapada, ill will, negativity. This is any kind of negativity in the mind, from irritation to grumbling mind, to anger, hatred. These are kind of extreme forms, but trivial or subtler forms would be like irritation, annoyance. You're sitting meditation and there's a fly buzzing and you feel annoyance at it. This is vyapada. So this is very often manifests as a negative. It's probably the most common form. Is it manifests as a negative expression of sense desire. It's like there's some sense experience that one wishes would be eliminated. So it's kind of the flip side of sense desire. So sense desire is enjoying or wishing for pleasant sense experience. This is for feeling the negativity and anger at or annoyance at painful sense experience. So it's also keeping one trapped in the sense level of consciousness, and is a hindrance to samadhi. The mind that's caught in that negativity is unable to come to that full stillness. The third nivarana is sloth and torpor, tinamidda. 2 words in Pali, tinamidda, so it's been translated as sloth and torpor. Just, I think the translators are looking for synonyms. So the words are very close. They're someplace it said that relates to dullness of the mind and dullness of the mental objects, right? Chitta and Chittasika. But taken together, it represents dullness, sleepiness, heaviness of mind. It's something I've observed over the years with many. That's actually my own case as well, but I've observed it in many other individuals that when they first take up meditation, very often the biggest struggle for quite a long time, months or years in some cases, is painfulness in the body. That is people struggle with being able to sit, and they have aches and pains, and then they get to the point where they finally get past that, and oh, this feels okay, and then they immediately fall asleep. and the next struggle is with sloth and torpor, getting past that dullness and sleepiness. And again, it's a range of mental states. Boredom is a form of chinamida. It's like mental dullness. One teacher once said, "If you're bored, it's because you're boring." That you have a lack of zest or interest, or it's just a dullness in the mind. Yeah. But then it's also expressed as sleepiness, heaviness, like a darkness of consciousness. It's related to, in many cases, it springs from the deeper defilement of vibhava tanha, the desire not to be. This feeling of existence or consciousness, particularly, as being oppressive. One wants to just blot it out, so that one escape from that is dullness and sleep. And one can avoid those states of mind in the life by indulging in sense pleasures or chasing around with a busyness of different kinds. But when you're sitting still in meditation, if you're overcome by vibhava tanha, one obvious escape is just to go unconscious. So this the one of the roots of it. There's also a lack of energy is also a factor. Just a need to bring up the quality of effort and energy. There's a state of mind that the Thai masters talk about a lot, is bhavanga, and it's a word that originates from Abhidhamma, although the way it's used in the Thai tradition is related, but it's not exactly the same as the technical meaning of bhavanga in the Abhidhamma. In Abhidhamma, bhavanga is, let's say, the mind idling in neutral. It's the simplest base unit of consciousness, when the mind is not engaged in anything in particular, but it's still conscious. So it's like the barest minimum of being conscious. This is the type of mind that one experiences in deep sleep. And during the ordinary day, one goes in and out of bhavanga. And if you're confused and dull and you're missing things, then that means you're falling into many more mind moments of bhavanga. If you're sharp and clear and alert and on top of things, then you've got continual stream of consciousness with very few moments of bhavanga. And the way they use it in the Thai tradition is to reference a state of mind in meditation that elsewhere I've heard it called false samadhi. Is one sitting in meditation and gets a kind of dark, dull consciousness, but it can actually feel kind of pleasant, sort of dreamy state that you're not awake, and you're nowhere near being alert, and it's not real samadhi. It's just a kind of a dozy state of mind. It can be very hard to shake off. So that's something to be watched out for, and then to remember that samadhi is bright and fully awake, although it's still. It's not jumping around. The fourth nivarana is vicikiccha, or uncertainty, or doubt. This was also one of the fetters, as we recall, So this is the factor of mind that causes one to be uncertain about the path, uncertain about the goal, uncertain about your own abilities, this doubting mind. It's important to understand the difference between, this kind of doubt and a general openness of mind. This is not like having an open, inquiring mind. This is like having a mind that is unable to rest because it's uncertain, and yet it craves certainty. It manifests often as jumping back and forth between, it's like this, no, it's like that, not being able to settle. The opposite of this is saddha, or faith, or confidence. One has confidence and just carries on. This is something that's very important for success in meditation. It may be the one key factor why some individuals are able to make rapid progress in meditation and some are not, is a degree of saddha, which is a devotion or faith in the practice. You just do it. Whereas some individuals are always doubting and uncertain. Am I doing it right? Is this the correct way? Maybe I should try another tradition. Maybe I should do something a little different. Maybe I shouldn't meditate at all. Maybe I should do some other practice. But if someone just devotes himself immediately to the practice and just gives himself up to it, then they have success. Because the mind isn't divided in this way. There's a story in Ajahn Mahabua's biography of Ajahn Mun that they were up north in the hill country, and him and his group of monks, and the people up there, they're not ethnic Thais. There's like some kind of a tribe that are not Buddhists. They're just animists. At first, the tribes people there, they think that the monks are some kind of wizards, and they change into tigers at night and eat people. So they become, afraid of them. But then gradually they figure out they're harmless, and they're observing them, like they're peeking at them and see what they're doing, and they sit for a long period of time, then they get up and walk up and down, then they sit down again, and finally they ask the monks, what are you doing all the time? With sitting, and then you walk up and down, then you sit again. And Ajahn Mun tells them, we're looking for Buddha. What's Buddha? Buddha was something very precious that we had a long time ago and lost, and now we're looking to find it. Well, how do we find Buddha? Can we look for it too? Yes, okay, sure. Just sit and close your eyes and keep quiet and say to yourself, Buddha, Buddha, Buddha. So they start doing this, and that's their whole instruction. Never mind studying Abhidhamma for 20 years, or this is it. Just sit down and say Buddha, Buddha, Buddha. And within a few weeks, there were many of the villagers had attained to first, second, and even third jhana. And this is because of the purity and simplicity of their mind. They're not corrupted by all the education and the complex doubts that arise in an educated person's mind. They hear the teacher tells them, say Buddha, Buddha, and they just do that. There's a story in a similar vein, a Tibetan story. There was a woman yogi who would chant every day, Om Mani Padme Om, and she'd do that all day long, and there was a colored rainbow appeared over her hut all the time. So people came from miles around to wonder at this manifestation. There was a rainbow always over her hut, and you could hear her chanting. And one of the scholar monks came up from Lhasa to investigate, and he heard her chanting Om Mani Padme Om, and he knocked on her door and told her, you know, you're doing that wrong. It's supposed to be Om Mani Padme Hum. And she says, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. And so she corrected her chant, but the rainbow went away. As, you know, doubt and division had arisen in her mind. So that's really an illustration. That second story too is an illustration of it's important not to be too concerned with, am I doing it right? It'll correct itself. You know, if you just devote yourself to doing the practice, with time it'll correct itself. Now, you can save some time perhaps if you get good instruction and clear up your doubts with questions. But the important thing is to just do it. So that's Wicikitcha. The last defilement is Uddhacca Kakucha. Now, Uddhacca was one of the fetters as well. That's restlessness. And this is another one that uses two words that are near synonyms, Uddhacca Kakucha. So some translators have quite cleverly called this worry and flurry. Carry over the rhyming sense of the Pali word, and it's one of those words. What do they call them? Onomatopoeia. That sort of the sound has some degree of the meaning is in the sound, because it's like the mind is jumpy and restless. It sort of sounds like that. Uddhacca Kakucha. Yeah. The mind is jumping around. This is expressed as anxiety, and is probably the best single word to describe it. It's the nattering of the mind. The mind won't be still. It's caught up in thought forms and worries about the past and future. Regrets about the past, fears and anxieties about the future. So the mind becomes quite disturbed and restless, wandering round and round. And there's no way of settling the thought formations with thought formations. That's an important principle to bear in mind. You can't think your way out of it. This is some kind of implicit error that the mind can make, is you can think about it enough, you'll solve it, and you can drop it once you've solved it. But you never do. It just opens up a new can of worms, and you're just endlessly chasing round and round. You just have to cut through it like the Gordian's knot. The story of Gordian's knot. This is a Greek story. It was like a puzzle that the philosophers were supposed to try and solve. It was a piece of rope tied into this really complex knot, and people were trying to undo the knot for generations. Nobody had been able to undo the knot until Alexander the Great came along, and he just pulled out his sword and cut through it with his sword. So you have to just let it go. Just drop it. Mindfulness of breathing is actually the practice that is most conducive to settling down thought formations. It's recommended for that. And I would say if you're particularly caught in a lot of thought formations and it's very difficult to settle the mind, it may be better for you to do the meditation on the belly than the nose tip. Just to get the consciousness down below the neck. Some people are really caught up in their heads. And if you're caught in those thought formations, sometimes just resting on the belly, it's related in the sort of the energetic system of the body-mind. It's related to more kind of elemental states of mind and less complex. You can just rest down there. If you're able to do it on the nose tip, that's probably more peaceful. But each one has kind of a virtue of its own. So these are the 5 nivarana that prevent the mind from settling into samadhi. And really, when the 5 nivarana are settled, when you're able to quiet them down, the mind will naturally settle into samadhi. And there's no effort involved. There's just a natural settling of the mind returning to its base condition, when it's not caught up in these wanderings. If any of these 5 are a particular problem, there are antidotes. If sense desire is a chronic problem, then be useful to take up meditation on the body, the 32 parts of the body, or corpse meditation, very powerful, but can be disturbing to the mind. 32 parts is probably the best advice to examine the body in terms of components like skin, muscle, bone, blood, marrow. There's a traditional list of 32 you can find, and go through that and contemplate, visualize the different parts. Ill will one should develop if one's full of negativity and anger or hatred or just annoyance, grumbling mind, is a problem. Then develop loving kindness or compassion meditation. Sloth and torpor can be hard to shake off once you're caught in it, because it's sort of a self-perpetuating. But you have to make the effort, put in effort to raise energy. So you have to energize the system. And the Buddha talked about different ways of doing that. There's a story about him and Moggallana, who later became one of his chief disciples and a premier monk of development of psychic powers. And he had a very big problem early on when he first started with sloth and torpor. And the Buddha came to see him and gave him advice of different things he could try to shake this sloth and torpor. Get up and do walking meditation, or splash the face with cold water. Go outside and look at the stars. One of the odd ones is pull on the earlobes, kind of a like acupressure point or something that you get a little energized when you pull on the earlobes. There's another one, it's not mentioned by the Buddha in this case, but from Tibetan, similar to that, is to pull the tip of the tongue back inside the mouth as far back on the upper palate as you can, and kind of press in there. It's another sort of acupressure thing. Another one that I've learned here is go outside and walk about a bit in the snow in your bare feet. That'll wake you up pretty quick if you're suffering from sleepiness. So you shake off the sloth and torpor that way. And the one at sort of the end of the Buddha's list, and the one that he emphasized, was visualization of light. Now, if you bring up in the mind, even you're in a dark cabin and there's no light, if there's light outside, it's helpful. You can just open your eyes and take in the light. But if you don't have external source of light, just visualize light. Imagine a bright light. Try and fill the mind with, and the body mind with light, white light. If one is caught up in uncertainty and doubt, then the advice is, first of all, to clear up doubts, resolving them by speaking to a teacher or looking it up in a book. Try and resolve your questions so you can put them aside. And also probably even more important is just developing the faculty of saddha, faith, which is done with contemplation of the Buddha or with chanting, maintaining a shrine, developing that sort of devotional aspect. And it's a kind of the aspect of spirituality that speaks to the heart rather than to the intellect. Cultivate that. It tends to be the more intellectual type people who are plagued by these sort of doubts that causes the mind to wander. And you need to balance that with the development of heart. And the hindrance of anxiety is calmed in particular by mindfulness of breathing. This is given as the antidote for anxiety because it's a contemplation that is simple, repetitive, body-based. And like I mentioned before, if you have a lot of anxiety, you may find it beneficial to meditate on the abdomen rather than the nose tip. If you're trying to develop samadhi, then using the abdomen, a particular technique is to find a point, mentally find a point a little below the navel where you can feel the movement of the breath in and out. The Japanese Zen tradition uses this a lot, and they call it the har point. And it's also used in martial arts because it's said to be the center of gravity of the body. So when you're making these, moves, jumps and kicks and swinging around, you kind of try and moving around that center point, you'll stay balanced. Yeah. And in those yogic traditions that talk about a chakra system, we find in yoga traditions and in Tibetan Buddhism, they talk about chakras as well. That chakra is the one that relates to the emotional base. In ordinary life, if you're nervous, if you're worried, you feel that in your belly. Right? You feel like there's a phrase, butterflies in the belly, right? And people who are chronically nervous often get ulcers. And this is a relation point. And when that chakra is fully open, then it's becomes the oceanic bliss. So you're clearing up that problem of anxiety at the emotional source there rather than at the mental level, because you can't really, as I said, you can't think your way out of it. You can't end anxiety and worry by trying to solve your issues in your mind. You have to get below them and get to the kind of emotional root. So if you can avoid falling into these 5 hindrances, then, as I said, the meditation becomes effortless. There's no struggle. It just naturally deepens. And whenever you're experiencing difficulty, you're wandering down one of these 5 byways and getting lost. You have to find your way back and stabilize yourself again in the center and just allow the mind to settle into that natural, peaceful state that lies beneath the turbulence of the superficial sense experience mind.
Mayam Dhamma Kataya Sadhu Kalam Dadamase Sadhu